So afternoon. So we're going to give everybody like probably 5 more minutes to join. So you can continue playing the music, Rowan, and then at 1:05 we'll begin. Thanks, Rowan. Nice afternoon, everyone. I'm Shereka Simmonds, your tutor for Econ Paper 1. So it's not a lot of us here, so I'm going to ask that you guys please participate. Try to make it an interactive session because remember, it's here to help you guys prepare for your exams this week. So I'm going to share my screen with the paper and we'll begin. So Ron would have just shared a poll. Most of you are somewhat ready. Right. So as you guys know, multiple choice, it can be one of the trickiest papers that you do because on paper 2, you can write and give an explanation based on what you think the correct answer might be. But for multiple choice, it's either that you're wrong or you're right. So some key tips I will share for persons doing multiple choice, any multiple choice exams. 1, ensure that you have your equipment ready. Some persons like to go in exam with one pencil, one pen. No. Sometimes you don't have any sharpener. You have to ensure that you're prepared mentally and in terms of equipment. So ensure that you're prepared. 2, don't go in the exam with the mentality that you have to complete the entire paper. Both paper 1 and paper 2, that might not be the case. It depends on how fast you work and how effective you work. So what I usually suggest to persons is ensure that you pay attention to the question, answer the questions to the best of your ability. So you know that even if I don't answer everything, I know that out of what I answered, I should be able to get at least 80%. So try to put yourself in that position where you answer the questions effectively and properly instead of trying to answer all the questions. So sharing my screen now. So we'll be going through the session today. Won't be long considering that I don't have much time today. So I'm going to just go through the questions. As I said, it's an interactive session. I expect you guys to answer and participate. So we both know that the question paper lasts for 1 hour, 15 minutes. You have 60 multiple choice to answer during that time, and you have 4 options for each question. So persons would have stated that they're somewhat ready for the exam. I'm considering that you're somewhat ready for both paper 1 and 2. So we're going to begin. So the first question, also something to note, with multiple choice, it's not about knowing everything, but it's about practice. So persons who would have gone through other papers would have noticed that there are a lot of repeat questions. So you'll see a question on this paper and you see it again next year and you see it for probably about 3-4 years. So if you have enough papers, practice as much as you can, go through as much of them as possible as you can to ensure that you have an idea of what the questions will actually look like. So question 1, which of the following rewards occurs to the factor of production called capital? So the answer is there, but can somebody give me a brief description of what are factors of production? You guys would have, I think, gone through something like this yesterday, so this should be easy. All right, go ahead, Zardia. Zarida.
Factors of production are all the resources used to produce goods or services.
That's correct. And you can list them?
Land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship.
Right, great. So for Capital. So she would have stated land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurial talent. So rent would be for which one?
Land,
Profit would be,
entrepreneurship,
and wages.
labor.
Yeah, so therefore capital would be interest. Correct. So next question, which of the following is a component of a country's balance of payment? And guys, if you have any questions, if we might say something or explain something and you don't understand, please feel free to open your mic and ask the questions. So which of the following is a component of a country's BOP, or balance of payment, as some persons would say? So you have 4 options. Why wouldn't B be an option? The value of the government's expenditure. Anybody, why wouldn't B be an option? Or why B can't be the answer? Or what is BOP, guys? What is balance of payments account? Anybody? All right, so nobody. So BOP is basically just a statement indicating what the country spends on import and exports. So it's basically showing how much money is earned from exports and how much money is spent on imports. So if that defines our balance of payments accounts, then government spending would be the general heading for what? It would be the general heading for imports. And you have to account for both. So government does spend a little of their money on imports, but that doesn't cover the entire term of balance of payment. So that couldn't be the answer. So the next option is the country from which goods are imported. That's totally out of it, because that doesn't account for any payment really. And the number of commercial banks in a country, that doesn't really tell us anything about the BOP. So definitely your answer would be A. So 3, what is trade liberalization? So for this one, the answer is C, the removal of trade barriers. So as you guys probably would have known from probably social studies for persons who do that subject, trade liberalization is basically removing the barriers so it's easier for countries to trade effectively. Next question, which of the following strategies is not used by government to influence economic decision of businesses? So how you could approach this question is to look at what is it that government does that affect businesses and what is it that businesses expect from the government. So passing minimum wage legislations would affect both government and businesses in that these businesses employ persons and they have to stick to particular regulations. So B would actually influence their economic decisions. C, regulating the emission of toxic waste. Everyone knows that that is a very big economic decision that is made by the government in terms of ensuring that we don't pollute our environment. D, identifying areas where business should be located. The government does have a say in that. So again, the only option we have here would be to increase the increasing of retirement fund. That is totally dependent on the business and on government. Those don't have a link between the two separate entities. Any questions before we move on to question 5? Or everybody is clear? I'm guessing everyone is clear. So item 5 refers to the following diagram, which shows the relationship between good X and good Y produced by a certain country using all their resources. So once they refer to two goods being compared or two goods using the same amount of resources or the same types of resources, it's definitely your PPF or your production possibility curve. So can somebody tell me how would we define points on a PPF? So let me use my pencil. So if we have a point here, let's call this A, and you'll get follow-up questions further down on the paper that speak about this, but just to get it out of the way now, we're going to call this point B and C. So there are specific terms that are used to identify points on your PPF, and we're just going to briefly run through them. So if it's located on the line, that's on the curve, it is considered to be using your resources effectively. So anywhere along the line, you're using your resources effectively. If it's below the line, closer to either your X or Y axis, you're considered to be having idle resources. So that means we might have 10 pound of yam and some bananas, and we probably could make a banana pudding or something, but we just choose to keep the bananas and just have them there. So we have idle resources. For C now, C is where you're trying to produce more than what you can. So we want to make 10 cakes, but we only have the resources to make 5. So C would where you be at if you're trying to make 10 and you don't have those resources. So try to remember those points. Idle resources, it would be A. Effective production or if resources are being used effectively would be B, and C would be where you're going beyond your reach. So 6, some Caribbean countries are experiencing a lack of industrialization, a low standard of living, and a high population growth rate. Which of the following terms best describe the economies of these countries? So it can't be advanced if there's a lack of industrialization. It can't be developed if they're still having low standard of living. Agricultural, they didn't mention anything about agriculture, so those 3 options are completely out. So it would be a developing country. And trial and error exists, guys, not just with math, but with every multiple choice scenario. You are able to eliminate the answers that don't make sense and focus on the ones that actually make sense, and then use key terms from your question to find out which one is suitable. So question 7, country X allows the foreign exchange market to determine the rate of its domestic currency based on forces of demand and supply. So this type of exchange rate is referred to floating. So can somebody tell me what is fixed exchange rate? If you guys know. If you don't know, that's fine. Or what is pegged? I am not able to see the chat, guys. So if you're typing in the chat, just open your mic and speak, please. Right, I'm guessing nobody wants to share. So floating, as they say, is when you allow the market to determine the price, or what we call the value of the exchange rate. Fixed is when a country agrees to a specific value regardless of how the market behaves. So for example, if Jamaica was supposed to have a fixed exchange rate, Omario, I notice you raise your hand. Go ahead if you have something to say. Oh, you can't unmute. Oh, all right. Let me see if I can see the chat. Oh, you're not allowed. Let me see if I can change that. Right. I think the host would have to give you the option to unmute. You guys should be able to unmute now. Didn't know you guys were having that issue. All right, can somebody unmute and tell me if they're able to know? Are you guys still having issues? All right. So you are correct. I saw your message in the chat, Omario. You are correct. So for pegged is usually, I think I was explaining fixed exchange rate. So for example, Jamaica, if we were to agree to a fixed exchange rate, it would have to be an agreement with the central bank and the government to say that we're going to agree that whatever the market produce, regardless of that, we're going to stick to an exchange rate, say 150 JMD per USD. So even if there was a chance that the US dollar would fall below the 150 because of that agreement, all transactions within the country would have to still take place at 150. So that's a fixed exchange rate. Pegged is when it is usually linked to some other value. For example, if the same 150 JMD per USD, if you were supposed to peg that now, probably to say the British pound. So it would be based on some fluctuation of another value. So if the British pound change beyond a certain point, then there might be a change in the exchange rate, but otherwise it won't change. So pegged is basically a little mixture of fixed and floating. All right. So question 8, a downward shift in your PPF curve can be caused by increasing prices? No, because we both know that the PPF does not account for prices. So there are no situation where prices are involved in the PPF. Increase in wages, maybe that could cause a shift, but would it be a shift outwards or inwards? Increase in imports also could cause a shift, but is that shift outwards or inwards? Improvement in technology could be a shift as well, but again, is it outward or inward? So now we have 3 options to choose from because we already eliminated A. We have B now, which says increase in wages. So we know that wage would be, as I think it was Miss Prince mentioned earlier, it's a factor of production. Well, it's the reward for a value or a factor of production, which would be labor. We know that labor is a resources and resources are very critical for a PPF. So hence why that could be an option. Moving now to C, imports. Imports does not really deal with resources. So then we can eliminate C. Improvement in technology is a very critical resource. So now we're down to 2 options. So it's either that an increase in wages or an improvement in technology. An increase in wages mean that yes, you would have persons working, but at the same time, it would cause a drastic change in the labor market. and that would not cause an outward shift. So again, the only option that you have here is improvement in technology. 9, choice is the most important issue in economics. Because why are choices important? Anybody? You make choices every day, so you should understand the importance of choices. All right, I guess I'm getting no answer. Scarcity, somebody mentioned in the chat. Yes, so you have to make choices because you don't always have what you want, or you don't always can get what you want. So you have to make choices because there is scarcity. So income is not evenly distributed. That's not the most important because keyword most. So income is important, but it's not the most important thing. Most countries have a low per capita income. That's not the most important reason why we make choices. Money is scarce in relation to a country's resources. We both know that a country always has reserve, so there's not necessarily a scarcity of money. So the only answer here would be C, resources are scarce relative to what we consumers want. So 10, prices of goods in market economy fluctuate while prices of goods in planned economies tend to be fixed. The most likely reason for this difference is that the market economy, the answer is D, determine the demand and supply forces. Well, the demand and supply forces determine prices. So as you know, whatever price the market determines is based on how much goods the consumer needs versus how much the producers can produce. And once there's an equilibrium between those two factors, then that would be the agreed price. So as the question said, there are two types. Well, there are more than two types, but they're comparing planned versus a free market. In a free market, we just gave that explanation where it's about demand and supply. But in a planned economy now, they said it's tend to be fixed. It is fixed, but it can change. So that's something also to note. So even though in a planned economy, the government determines most of the prices, just know that these prices can be changed, but it just requires much more than the market for them to change. 11, which of the following is least likely to affect the efficiency of labor? So everybody here will be joining the work well if you're not already there in the future. So you should be able to tell what would motivate you and what would not motivate you to work, or what would cause it to be efficient versus what would not cause it to be efficient. So your education, we're going to start from the bottom. So education and training, that will affect your efficiency, because if you don't have the proper knowledge and requisite to execute a particular job, then that's going to affect how productive you are. The level of technology, in this case, technology does not refer to the devices that we use, but actually the method that we use to carry out certain things. So in economics, you guys should know this, but economics has different meaning for specific terms. So technology can mean one of two things, as I said. Can be a device, is your phone, your laptop, all of those things. It can also mean how things are done. So for example, in the past, persons usually wash with their hands. An improvement in technology would be now a washing machine, not in the sense that it is an electronic device, but now they're able to reduce the amount of time that somebody spends washing. They're able to reduce the amount of labor that somebody spends washing. Also, there are able to increase efficiency overall. So if I'm able to just put my clothes in the machine and I'm able to do something else, so you're increasing efficiency in more than one area. So the method has changed in that we're not using our hands, spending 2-3 hours washing anymore. We're using a machine or a different approach, and we're using less time, less energy. So that's another meaning for technology. Next, affirms profitability. So whether the country makes money or doesn't make money, we still work. We still have to work. Work as motivation, that is very, very important. So from the 4 options, keyword again, in bold, in caps, least likely would definitely be the firm's profitability, because sometimes persons really don't care whether the business is making money or not. They just care that, well, Friday I payday, may I get paid. So our answer would be B, the firm's profitability. 12, which of the following accounts is not included in BOP? So as I said before, BOP basically talks about your import, exports, and how they correlate with each other. Asset account is not included, definitely not. Definitely not. And in this case, you notice official financing accounts. So official financing account now refers to those accounts that are used to either say fund government spending, fund purchases, are not even purchases all the time, but sometimes it's used to build a country. So just like how the finance minister would come and they would present a budget and all of that, they would have to state, where did we get this money from? Where is it going to? So that's basically what they're referring to in the official financing account. So you need to state, government has 10 million here. What happened to this 10 million? We all know what current and capital account is. Those are the 2 main parts of your BOP. So asset account would be the only one that is out. So in seeking to stabilize an economy, a Caribbean territory, economy of a Caribbean territory, the role of the government should be increase tax, borrow more, forecast revenues, encourage skilled laborers to stay within the territory, import more consumer goods to satisfy the needs of the people, or review its policies on taxation, borrowing, and expenditure. So can somebody state what is the role of government in any country at all, in any economy? You can type it in the chat if you're unable to unmute. All right, so the question is, what is the role of government or of the government in an economy? Protection of the environment, that's true. How do they go about protecting the environment? To sustain order in a country and promote economic development. Very good, Omario. The government has the role of regulating the economy and also implementing taxes and different policies such as fiscal. Yes, that's correct. Placing taxes, yes. All right, good. So everybody understand what is expected of a government, of a country. So if we know that the government is supposed to protect us, protect our environments, they're supposed to create policies that enable them to do all these things. So the question asks us, we want to stabilize the economy. They pass legislations, yeah. So we want to stabilize an economy. And stabilize meaning something is out of place and we want things to come back in order. So if things are out of place, Probably there's a recession or something going on. Would it be wise to increase taxes, borrow more, and forecast revenues? Would it be wise to encourage skilled laborers to stay within their territory? Next, would it be wise to import more goods to satisfy the needs of the people? Or would it be wise to review its policies on taxation, borrowing, and expenditure? So you have to look at the question, as I said, guys, from different perspectives, because they can be tricky sometimes. It wouldn't be wise for a government who is going through some issue to be increasing taxes, borrowing more, and forecasting revenues, because they would be burying themselves more in debt. Encouraging skilled laborers to stay within their territory? No. It's better to have a diverse labor force than one that is focused. And diverse meaning having persons who are able to do more than one skill. Because if these persons' skills are not transferable, if that industry is to be shut down, then those persons would be out of a job. Importing more would be increasing the government spending. Increasing government spending would be like part A, where we said increasing taxes, borrowing more, and forecasting revenues. That's no good. So the only option we have here would be to review our policies on taxation, borrowing, and expenditure. So we need to go back to the drawing board now to see what can we do, what can we reduce, what can we change in order to stabilize the country. 14. 14. So Jamaica buys motor vehicle from Japan while Japan buys coffee from Jamaica. This has resulted in a balance of payment deficit for Jamaica. Which of the following statement best describes Jamaica's situation? So first thing, Jamaica has to pay more. Jamaica has to pay Japan more money. That is definitely the case. Definitely the case. Option I is definitely one of them. Japan has to pay Jamaica more money. That can't be if we're already paying them more money. Jamaica needs to export more to Japan. So that is correct. In order to close that deficit, we would have to export more coffee to them in order to make more money and close that gap. So the answer here would definitely have to be 1 and 3. Remember, guys, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat, and once I get the chance, I'll look at them. So 15, price elasticity of supply refers to the responsiveness of quantity supply to the change in price. And this is pretty self-explanatory because it says price elasticity. So if it says price elasticity of supply, that means supply is affecting price. If it was price elasticity of demand, demand would be affecting price or vice versa. So item 16 refers to the following table, which shows the amount of money associated with the various items. Based on the information in the table, what is GDP? So can somebody tell me the formula for GDP? GDP formula. All right, so the formula is C plus I plus G plus net export. So C would be our consumer spending, our consumption, how much people spend on goods and services. I would be your investments, so gross investments, and so you're asking if this is the expenditure approach? Yes. So as you guys know, you have several approach, income, expenditure, and output. So we're looking at the expenditure approach here. So G would be government spending, and we know that net export is the difference between your imports and exports. All right, so based on the information in the table, GDP would be 1,280. So it would be 800 plus 100 plus 300. And then we know that for net export, or sometimes persons just say import minus export. So you find the difference there, and that's 30. And you should get 1,280. 17 refers to the following diagram, which shows the price and quantity demanded for goods X. So the movement of the demand curve of goods X from D to D1 results from an increase in what? So we know that change in price causes movement along our curves, whether it's price, whether it's demand or supply. So movement along the curve is caused by a change in price. If there is a shift, there are several other factors that can cause a shift. We know that your income can cause a shift. It can be that you totally don't want the good anymore. Also, it can be external factors beyond your personal control. So the question asks us, what would cause a shift from D to D1? So that is a rightward shift, therefore it's referring to an increase in demand. So we now need to look at the options and see which one of these options can cause an increase in demand. So the cost of inputs used to produce the goods, that does not affect demand, that would most likely affect supply. The price of a complementary good, would actually cause a movement along the curve. Because remember, we said anything that's price related, movement along the curve. And for the price of good X, if it's price again, movement along the curve. So the only thing that would cause a shift is your consumer income. So according to economic theory, secondhand cigarette smoking is a negative externality. And it is a negative externality because, one, it's not affecting the person that is doing the action. So there's a third party involved. Two, it's considered to be negative because there's no way secondhand smoking is benefiting anybody. It's not a private good. It can't be positive, as I said, because it's not beneficial to anyone and it's not a merit good. Can somebody tell me what a merit good is? Anybody? Type it in the chat. Can you explain the options? Which option? Sorry, Zardi, I'm just seeing your message. Which option do you want me to explain? All right, I'm going to continue. A and C. For this specific question, right, for 18. All right, so I was asking what is a merit good, and nobody really explained. So we know it's not a private good because a third party is involved. It's not a positive externality because as we know, secondhand smoking has no benefit to either person. So it's not benefiting the smoker as well as the third party. And it's not a merit good because we know that merit goods are goods that are considered to be under-consumed and government usually subsidize those. So secondhand smoking is not under-consumed, so there is no need to produce more or subsidize it. So the only option we have would be a negative externality because, as I said, a third party is involved and the effect it has on that third party is a negative one. Any clearer? All right, good. So 19 refers to the following table, which shows units of labor and output. So they want us to figure out what is the number of labor units that produces the highest average product of labor. So first we need to know what is average product of labor. So average product of labor is total output divided by the number of labor units. So again, average output of labor is total output divided by the number of units of labor. So in this case, you would have to go through all of them, divide 372 by 6, divide 455 by 7, divide 496 by 8, and so on. And the one with the highest value would be your answer. So in this case, it's 7, because I think you divide and you should get something like 65 or something like that. I think for the first one, it would be 6. Give me a sec, guys. All right, guys, sorry about that. So as I said, when you divide 372 by 6, you should get, I think, 62. And for the second one, it should be 65, and then 62 again, and so on. So our answer would be 7. Next question, which of the following financial instruments are issued by a central bank on behalf of the government? Anybody? All right, so corporate bonds are issued by commercial banks or other financial institution outside of the central bank. So that wouldn't be an option. Equity securities, we know that those aren't issued by a central bank. They're usually issued by some broker. Shares on the stock exchange, again, a broker. So the only thing here that could be issued by a central bank is the treasury bills. Right, moving on. If we don't have any questions, 21 refers to the following curves, which show the demand for some products. So which of the curves above indicate that demand of the product is perfectly elastic? This one is pretty simple. Can somebody tell me which one refers to perfect elasticity? Miss, can I repeat the question, please? So I'm asking which one refers to perfect elasticity? I. Mhm. And why is it I and not 3 as this paper has? All right, so perfect elasticity, usually it's horizontal. So that's what you can sort it like that. So it's usually horizontal. Or you can look at it from another perspective where a change in the price does not cause any change in demand. So I'm going to say that again because sometimes persons confuse it with the fact that yeah. So a change in the price doesn't affect the demand. Give me a sec, guys. My background is getting pretty loud. Yes, guys. So prices doesn't really affect how much goods is produced. So elasticity, always remember horizontal. Elasticity, horizontal. Inelasticity, vertical. In most cases, that's how the graphs look. So that's something that you can probably sort. So the main objective of a credit union is it to encourage summer spending? No. Is it to encourage thrift among its members? Is it to provide credit to government agency, or is it to provide investment funds to companies? So credit unions, they don't serve the government, nor do they serve companies. So C and D would be out of it. So it can't be C, it can't be D because they don't provide services to those two entities. A now says encourage summer spending. No banking or financial institution encourage summer spending. So that would be totally out of it. So the only option we have here would be to encourage thrift among its members. So the term recession refers to a period of increased economic activity, gradual increase in GDP of a country, national economic prosperity in a country, or temporary economic decline. So recession, we all know, is a bad thing. So it's not an increase in economic activities. It's not an increase in GDP. Prosperity is also a good thing, so it can't be that. So the only option again, using the elimination method, would be D, temporary economic decline. Moving on to 24, item 24 refers to the following diagram, which shows the demand and supply of grapes. What is the equilibrium price and quantity demanded? So we're going to look at where the supply and demand curve meets. That would be our equilibrium point, which is at O. The equilibrium price now would be on your y-axis, which is PO, and the equilibrium quantity, which would be on the x-axis, is QO. So A would be your answer. So equilibrium price, once you hear equilibrium, we know that it's where your demand and supply curve meets. All right, 25. A normal supply curve for a farm producing, right? A normal supply curve for farm produce will slope downwards from left to right if farmers pass on increased costs to customers, are willing to produce more as prices increase, or C, increase their profit margins as prices increase, or D, they are willing to increase supply as demand decreases. So the factors that determine how your supply curve looks is one, cost of production and all those things in the background, but also the prices. So if pass on increased cost to consumers, that could be a factor, but let's leave that there for now. B, they're willing to produce more as prices increase. That could also be an option. So increase their profit margins as prices increase. Profits maybe. D, are willing to increase supply as demand increase. So D would be the first one that we take out. Why? Because we're trying to look at the supply curve by itself without being influenced by the demand curve. As the question asks you a normal supply curve, it didn't ask you what a normal market looks like, because we know the market comprises of supply and demand. So it asks you what a normal supply curve is. So we're eliminating the demand aspect, so these out of it. Profit margins as prices increase. Persons don't usually watch profits until demand comes into play. Again, we're not looking at the market in its entirety, but we're just looking at the supply side. So again, the increase in profit margins as prices increase would be out of it. A pass on increase cost to customers. So passing on increase cost to customers would not necessarily affect the slope of your curve. It would most likely affect the shift. Remember I said before, there are things that affect movement along a curve and things that affect shift in your curve. So passing increased cost to customers would not be a movement along the curve. Hence, the only option we have here that would show any relation between why our curve is downward or upward sloping, left to right is upward sloping, would be that as prices increase, the supply also increases. Now let me do a small sketch here to show you. As price increase, the supply increases as well. So we're moving from point 1 to point 2, the price goes up. Moving from point 1 to point 2, the supply goes up. So that is the reason our curve is slope upwards from left to right. Again, guys, pay attention to your key terms. They're only looking at the supply curve. So anything that's demand related would not be included. Hence why C and D are out. They're asking about why is it that your curve is upward sloping. They're not asking what moves your curve. Why is it upward sloping? Based on your graph, there are two things that can affect your curve once it is in a fixed position, and that's either price or quantity. So they're asking what changes quantity. So the only thing that could affect that is price. So sometimes they can look at it from a graphical perspective. I always tell persons this, your graph will always help you when it comes on to economics. If you know your graph, you can't go wrong. So 26 in 2013, the government fiscal budget showed that total estimated revenue was greater than total estimated expenditure. And this is known as a surplus. So we know that it's not an accumulated budget. It can be a balanced budget because, again, the word in bold is greater. So now we need to decide which one is greater than the other. So it can either be a surplus or a deficit, which is greater than the other. So in this case, revenue is greater, so it's a surplus. If expenditure was greater, it would be a deficit. So item 27 refers to the following information which relates to a manufacturing company. So total fixed cost is 10,000, total cost is 50,000, and the output is 100 units. So we know that the formula for this would be total output. So we're going to call that T is equal to fixed plus your variable costs. So in this case, we were told that our total output, our total cost is equal to 50,000. We know that the fixed cost is 10,000 and they want us to decipher what is our variable cost. So our variable cost is usually associated with our units. I usually tell persons that it looks like the equation of a line equation. So some value plus the variable cost times the quantity. So we're going to subtract the 10,000 from the 50,000 and that would give us our Vx. Once we get that value, which would be 40,000, we're going to divide now by the number of units because remember we want V and not the entire fixed variable cost. So that divided by 100 units now, that would give you your 400. So again, know your formula, total is equal to fixed plus variable times the quantity. So 400 times, working backwards now, 400 times the 100, that would give us 40,000 plus the 10,000, that would give us our total cost of 50,000. You can work like that as well, but that would take much more time. All right, 28. So 28 refers to the following diagram, which shows the simple circular flow of income in an economy. So they're just firms and households in this economy. The nominal flow labeled Y. So we're looking at what does the government give households? What does the government give households? They don't give us savings. They don't give us investments. They don't give us the factors of production because we produce those. So the only option here would be factor incomes. And factor income refers to what they pay us for the factors of production that we give them. 29, the term money supply refers to A, total amount of gold and silver and other precious metals in reserve. B, total assets based on the institutions in the financial sector. C, the amount of money traded in the foreign exchange market. Or D, total stock of money in an economy at a given moment. So A, it's totally not the gold and silver because there's much more to money supply than just gold and silver and precious metals. B, total assets based on the institutions in the financial sector. No, that could not be the answer because the institutions, they aren't the only one who possess money. So no. C, the amount of money traded in the stock exchange market. So if we're talking about supply, we're talking about all that market has to offer. The foreign exchange market only accounts for a portion. So again, that could not be your total money supply. So the only option here would be the total stock of money in an economy at a given time, and keyword at a given time. So it has to be stated at a specific time. So we can't just say money supply is 20 million. That would be incorrect. You have to state money supply was 20 million in 2021. So please note that part of your definition for money supply. All right, 30. So item 30 refers to the following table, which shows the price of a product, the quantity demanded, and the quantity supplied. So which of the following prices are reflects a shortage in the market? Anybody? And how would you know it's reflecting a shortage? Based on, is it based on the price or based on the values for QD and QS?
A shortage happens when quantity demanded exceeds quantity supplied, so it will be 2 and 4.
All right, great. I'm not sure who just spoke, but that is correct. So shortage is when you don't have enough to supply the people's demands. You don't have enough to supply the people's demands. So supply is smaller than demand. So as she said, in both cases, the price is at 2 and 4. 31 refers to the following table, which shows the production cost of 3 units of a product. What is the total cost when 3 units are produced? So I'm going to assume that everybody is aware of the terms fixed cost, total cost, as we mentioned before, but are you guys aware of marginal costs? And if you are, just give me a brief description of what marginal cost is. All right, so we're going to continue. So marginal cost is basically the cost incurred when an additional good is produced. So it's the cost incurred when an additional good is produced. So in this case, we started off with a total cost of 125. The next round, we end up with a total cost of 130. So our marginal good here, our marginal cost, sorry, would be 5. So total cost now is 130. Marginal cost is 60. What is our new total cost? All you have to do now is just add the 130 to the 60 and you get your new total cost, which is 190. Fixed cost never changes. So if we were to fill out this table, it would look something like this. No, that's not 30. Go ahead, Issa.
Okay, Miss, so you said that the marginal cost is the cost incurred when an additional product is produced. So we see that change happening 125, then it moves to 130. But then that doesn't happen when you start producing 3 units.
All right, so what you're trying to ask is why is it that it's increasing?
No, Miss, because weren't you saying that it increases by a certain number once an additional unit is produced? So at 1 unit, the total cost is 125. Then we move to 2 units and it's an additional 5. So the total cost moves to 130, right? But then when we start producing 3 units, it's not 135.
Oh, so all right. So what I need to clarify is the amount that you change by, it's not constant. So it's not that we're going to always increase by 5. Not sure if you get that. So marginal cost, it's not something that is fixed. We might hire 1 more person and our marginal cost, as in this case, would be 5. we hire another 2 or 3 more persons and we realize that our marginal cost jumped to 100. The concept behind that is the more labor you employ or the more persons you employ in order to get a job done, their efficiency decreases, so you incur more costs.
Okay.
So you might have 10 persons working, but it's not that all 10 persons are working effectively. So you still have to pay those 10 persons, but you might not be producing as much goods as before. It may be a 1 more than before, maybe a 2, but you could be producing way more. So as the units increase, yes, your total cost will increase, but the amount that your total cost increases by will change. So marginal cost is not fixed. Please note that, guys, it's not fixed. You might work it once and you get 2, you may work it another time, you get 10, you work it another time and you end up with 20. It varies depending on how much labor or how much units is being produced at each stage of production. Right, anybody else have any questions on that part? All right. All right, 32 refers to the following information which relates to the cost of output of a product. The marginal cost is, remember guys, marginal cost is cost incurred for producing one additional good. So here we're moving from 100 to 101. So all we have to do is find the difference between these two total costs, and that's 500. So our marginal cost is 500. So 33, a country faces the following production combinations: X, where production is employed, production with unemployed resources; Y, unattainable production combination; and Z, efficient production combination. So we spoke about this before. So somebody just tell me which one. Well, the answer is there, but yeah. So Z would fall on the line. So it's not A, could be B, not C, could be D. So we're down to 2 options already just by looking at Z. X now says production is unemployed. That means X should be below your curve. X is only below your curve in D, therefore D's our answer. So just remember, efficient or effectiveness is on the line, unemployed resources is below your line, and unattainable is above. The function of a central bank do not include which of the following? So the central bank issues notes and coins. It provides loans, yes, but does it provide loan to the public? Managing foreign exchange rate, yes, it does that. Maintain foreign currency accounts of the government, yes, it does that. So we know that the central bank does all 4 of these, but the one that we're iffing about is providing loans to the public. The central bank does not provide loans to the general public. Again, the central bank does not provide loans to the general public. The only institutions that the central bank provide loans to are banks and other financial institutions. And again, something to note, the central bank does not regulate all financial institutions in Jamaica. So they're still trying to sort that out where all of them have to report to the central bank, but at the moment, not all of them does. So item 35 refers to the following table, which shows the market demand and supply at given prices. Equilibrium price would definitely have to be where our market demand is equal to our supply. And that scenario is where the price per kilo of potato is $12. All right. 36, what is the original equilibrium price? So original is our keyword here, and we're going to look for our original equilibrium based on the numbering of the curves. So first one comes before two, so definitely we're looking at the D1 and S1 curve. D1 and S1. So D1 and S1 intersect at the point PO. They ask us for the price, not the quantity. So therefore, our answer is A, P0 or P0. So 37, holding the supply curve fixed. So we're stuck with S1, which is this curve. And they're assuming that there's a shift in the demand from D1 to D2. And they're asking if there will be a change in the equilibrium price. So yes, there will be a change because there is some shift, but we need to know what is that change. So we already know that we're moving from P0 because P0 is our equilibrium price. So we need to know, is it that we're moving above P1 or below P1? Based on these two intersections here and here, it's an upward movement. But now we need to find out the point where D2 meets S1, and that is at P3. So we already know that it's from P0, it's upwards to P3. So our answer is D, arise from P0 to P3. So a student has a daily allowance of $20 with which he can purchase chicken and chips or a burger in which country, but not both. If he purchases the chicken and chips, the opportunity cost of his decision will be, so opportunity cost is your next best option. Simple as you can put it, your next best option. So we have $20, we have two options, A or B. If we choose A, B becomes our opportunity cost. If we choose B, A becomes our opportunity cost. So in this case, he chose chicken and chips, so his opportunity cost has to be the burger he gave up. We don't have to read any further. The burger he gave up. $39. A government reduces tax on carrots. This causes the price of carrots to fall by 50%. The quantity demanded rose or rises by 50%. The price elasticity of demand for carrots in this case is 1. So you don't have to do any working out for this one because the values are the same. And everyone should know the relationship that exists between price and demand. So 50%, 50%, one goes up, one goes down. Again, 50%, both values are equal. So our answer is 1. 40. The measure that is most likely to reduce inflation. So what is inflation? Anybody? What is inflation?
When goods are on a constant increase throughout years, so there's too much money floating around in the economy.
Very good. So there's a lot of money in the economy. It's over a period of time. Things become pretty expensive because the assumption is that we have money circulating in the economy. So that is correct. So most likely to reduce, again, all these options might be, not sure yet, might be able to reduce inflation, but we want the most effective or the most likely one. A, an increase in bank lending. Bank lending would increase money supply. An increase in money supply would not reduce inflation. It would actually foster inflation. So let me go over that point. Bank lending, basically you getting a loan from the bank, increases money supply, and that would not reduce inflation. An increase in import duties, that would not get rid of inflation. Completely out of it. Importing in itself affects inflation drastically. So that would not reduce inflation in any way. A reduction in direct taxation. Reducing tax does not affect it does affect inflation, but not to the extent that we want it right now. Because the government reducing tax, that would mean that we consumers have more money to spend. You having more money to spend is the assumption that, again, there's money circulating in the economy. D, a reduction in government expenditure. So if the government spends less money, that means we now have to pay for everything else. Because look at it this way, from the perspective that you're looking at your expenditure approach. You have, say, $1,000 spending. The government has the same $1,000 spending. Government reducing their spending means there's no change in tax, because the question didn't state that they'll reduce their spending and reduce tax. So you're still paying tax. Government is paying for less things, hence consumers now have to pay for that. Because remember, government provides subsidies and all of that. So they're basically reducing their spending and pulling back the money from consumers back into their hands. So that would be a very good option to reduce the amount of money in circulation. So reducing government spending would be an option. 41, the amount of net export in the economy is given by negative 10 mil. This indicates that the value of export is less than the value of imports. So we know that the formula, let me write it, it's exports minus imports. So export minus imports, and we got a value of negative 10 million. So that is basically telling us that we're spending too much on imports and we're not exporting enough. So based on the formula, if you get a negative value, it means that imports is greater. So your answer is C, export is less than imports. In economics, the excess of human wants over existing resources is scarcity. We would have spoken about that earlier. Large firms can achieve savings in unit costs as a result of advertising and packaging. This kind of economies of scale is classified as marketing. So it's not financial because, yes, they're trying to save on cost, but it's not really financial because no transaction is really involved. Technical, no, it wouldn't be technical because technical would have to refer to like a procedure or some method. Managerial, there wasn't much change in management because that wasn't mentioned in the question. So the only thing that we have here is marketing. And we both know that packaging and advertising are a huge component of marketing. So 44. The relationship between price and quantity demanded of a normal good is described as inverse. There is no direct relationship between price and quantity, and that can be deducted from your graph. This is your demand curve. If price goes up, our demand decreases. Lower price, more demand. So hence why it's an inverse relationship and not direct, nor is it a shift. Because remember, we mentioned you're talking about prices, you're referring to movement along the curve. So it's not a shift, it's not indirect because the question stated that there is a relationship, so it can be indirect. Direct, no, so it has to be an inverse relationship that exists. 45, a country has a comparative advantage in the production of a commodity when it can produce that commodity, or it can produce more of that commodity than any other country, can produce that commodity at a lower opportunity cost than any other country, it has a large share of the market for that commodity than any other country, accounts for a greater percentage of the global sale of that commodity than any other country. So what we're going to look at is basically removing the ones that don't make any sense. So comparative advantage has nothing to do with share of the market. It has only to do with how a country is able to produce a particular good. So C has a large share of the market would be out. As I said, it has nothing to do with a country owning 50 or 10% of the market. No. Again, if it has nothing to do with the market, then it can't account for, we're not accounting for the greater percentage of the global sale, because that's basically talking about the market still. So we're down to two options now. The country is able to produce that commodity more than any other country, or they can produce the commodity at a lower opportunity cost than another country. And it is B. So it can produce the commodity at a lower opportunity cost than any other country. And that would give them the advantage in that they're able to produce more of that good. So again, it can't be A, because A is not telling us what is comparative advantage. It's telling us the result of comparative advantage. So our answer is B, can produce that commodity at a lower opportunity cost than any other country. And once you talk about comparative advantage, ensure, even if you're asked to write the definition, please ensure that you include the fact that you're talking about opportunity costs. It's not about total cost or anything like that, but opportunity costs. 46, a firm produces 29 pairs of high quality leather shoes at a fixed cost of 20,000 and a variable cost of 9,000. On producing the 30th pair, the new total cost rose to 30,000. What is the marginal cost of the 30th pair? All we have to do is find the difference, and then we'd be good. So find the difference between the total cost of producing 29 pairs and the total cost of producing 30. So in theory, open competition on a world scale facilitates A, high level of dependency on tourism, B, increase in trade unions negotiating power, C, government manipulation of market outcomes, or D, the development of competitive advantage based on prices. So competition is good. As person studying economy, you would have been told that having a competitive market is way better than not having one. Persons prefer the free market, as some say it, versus that probably of an oligopoly or any other market type. Why? Because it's more efficient. So when you're talking about an open market, it's not specific to tourism, so it wouldn't be A. Increasing trade union negotiating power. No, they don't have much power when the market is open. As I said, it's determined by the market forces of supply and demand. Trade unions are like mediators. So if we're solely depending on consumers and firms to communicate with each other, we don't need a mediator. And as I said, it's an open market, so there's no need for a trade union. So A and B are out. Government manipulation of the market. If it's an open market, it can't be that government is manipulating it. So the only option we have here again is D, the development of a competitive advantage based on prices. So 48, which of the following is not a determinant of a shift in the demand of laptop computers? So before we stated that income is definitely a shift. So that is one. Preference can be a shift. Increase in the price of desktop computers. Yes, that would cause us to not want to purchase desktop, but purchase laptop instead. So a movement, again, prices talk about movement, shift, other factors. So once they mention price, we know that is a movement and not a shift, so our answer is B. And before I end, I'm going to draw a line. We're almost done here. So before I end, I'm just going to do a graphical explanation of what I mean by movement and shift. Which of the following factors will contribute to a surplus on the balance of trade of a country? So surplus, balance of trade, we know export and import. We know that the formula is export minus import. So if there's a surplus, that means our export is greater than our import. So our answer is A, export is greater than imports. The currency of a country may appreciate in value when there is an increase in the demand for its imports, the demand for its exports, its balance of trade deficit, its balance of payment deficit. So when they mention deficit, we know that it can't be any of those. Because if we want our dollar or our currency to appreciate, that means it's going to increase in value. Deficit does not refer to an increase in our currency. So it has to be either A or B. So if the demand for imports increase, that would cause our currency to depreciate, meaning that we would want more of the foreign currency in order to facilitate payments for imports. So I'm going to say that again. An increase in the demand for imports would force us, for example, we're buying potatoes from the US. If we're going to buy more potatoes, we're going to need more US dollar to pay the US government for their potatoes. That would not cause our Jamaican dollar to appreciate. It would most likely cause it to depreciate. So our money will continue to lose value. So the only thing here that would actually boost our dollar would be that whatever we're exporting, banana, yam, maybe potatoes too, we need persons to demand that more. Hence, they would demand more Jamaican dollar and our dollar would appreciate. So the answer for B is the demand for our exports. 51, when an economy which was once booming suddenly starts to experience low demand for goods and services, leading to companies and businesses closing down, rising unemployment, and falling standard of living, the country is said to be experiencing a recession. It's not a revaluation. It's not an externality. It's not disequilibrium. It's a recession. 52. The economic system where major economic decisions are made by private individuals and business is known as definitely free market. It's not planned because that would be government. It's not controlled and it's not subsistence because you know that small scale and it's usually determined by the consumers who are producers themselves. So it would be a free market. So production can be defined as interaction between buyers and sellers. No, that would be a market situation. Can it be defined as pricing of resources according to demand? No. Economic relationship between output and input? No, maybe, depending on what you're looking at it from. Or can it be defined as the transformation of inputs into output? That would be a better definition for production. Transformation of raw materials into final goods and services. Which of the following measures is least likely to be used to reduce imports? Least likely, keyword least likely, be used to reduce imports. So we know tariffs are used to reduce imports, quotas are used to reduce imports, embargoes are used to reduce imports. Subsidies, are those used to reduce imports or increase imports? In most cases, they are used to increase, not reduce. So tariff, quota, and embargoes are limitations on importance, while subsidies usually promote. So again, tariff, quotas, and embargoes are usually limitations on importations, while subsidies is usually to promote. So a pure public good can be described as. So what is a public good? What are the two terms that are used to describe a public good? Somebody?
Non-rival and zero price.
Non-rival, zero price, correct. Also, they're considered non-excludable as well. So it's not excludable, it's not diminishable, and we already agreed that it's not rival. So the only option we have here is zero priced. And it's good to know terms that are associated with these. So like merit goods, public goods, private goods, know the terms that are associated with these. Which of the following is not an example of a primary good? So we know primary goods are used to produce other goods. They are basically the basis of production. So we know a banana is a primary good because it's raw material. It can be used to make other things as well. Bauxite is raw material, which is used to make aluminum. Crude oil, raw material. Again, furniture is a final product, so it would be the option here. Again, keyword to note, not. And sometimes you might overlook the word not or most likely, least likely, but sometimes the options that are given kind of give you a clue as to which answer you should be leaning to. So in this case, it's C, furniture. So 57 refers to the following table, which shows the current account section of a country's BOP for the year 2014. What is the country's balance of merchandise trade? What are merchandise? What are merchandise, guys? Goods. Merchandise are goods. Anybody else want to add something to that?
Products.
Products. So are merchandise visible or invisible? Visible. All right, good. All right, so if they are visible, what would be our answer in this case? Anybody can drop it in the chat.
The exports minus the imports.
And your answer is?
A negative 38 million.
Good. So everybody see why we chose to use visible and not invisible? Merchandise are visible, good guys. So you realize they kind of switch it up on you this time where they gave you both visible and invisible, even though you might not need one group. So pay attention, ensure that you understand what the terms mean. So merchandise are not just goods and services, but visible. 58, which of the following is not a function of IMF? So fostering global monetary cooperation, settling trade disputes between countries, promoting the financial stability of a country, assisting the country with BOP deficit difficulties. So the IMF does foster global monetary cooperation, especially after all of the recessions that has happened globally over the years. They were pretty critical in getting the world back together. Settling trade disputes, no, they don't do that. Promote financial stability, yes, they do. Assist countries with BOP deficit, definitely. So B would be our option here. And as you can see, the World Trade Organization would be in charge of settling any disputes or any trade-related matters. So the restriction of international trade through tariff embargoes, quotas, and exchange control is referred to protectionism. Globalization is basically opening up the market so everybody can trade freely. Bilateral agreement is an agreement between two countries about trade. Structural adjustment, that's not it. So the only option we have here is protectionism. And the last question before I do the small demonstration, if you guys have any questions at the moment, you can drop them in the chat before we move on to the explanation that I have to give. Item 60 refers to the following table, which shows the manufacturing output as a share of gross domestic product GDP for 4 countries, W, X, Y, Z. So the table shows that all countries experience, so let's see, 28, 23, 19, that's a decline. So that's a decline. Right. 40, 34, 31, that's a decline again. 29, 26, 21, that's a decline. 29, 28, 23, that's a decline. So you can analyze the data before you even look at the question based on the description that was given before. So the table shows all countries experience a decline in the gross domestic product, a decline in the sale of manufactured goods and services, an increase in the employment in the manufacturing sector, a decline in the manufacturing output as a share of gross domestic product. So again, note what did the question or what did the table show us? The table showed us output as a share of GDP. So we can't say definitely that there was a decline in the gross domestic product because the table did not give us that information. Again, we can't say there was a decline in the sale of manufactured good because the table did not give us that information. And we don't know what are the factors that led to these decline. It can be an increase because, as I said, everything is a decline. And lastly, a decline in the manufacturing output as a share of gross domestic product. So that is our answer. So I'm going to stop sharing. If you have any question, guys, please post them in the chat. I'm going to reshare my screen with something else. I'm going to reshare my screen with something else. As I said, it's good to note your graphs, and I'm just going to do a small explanation of how I used to use my graphs when I was doing my exams, just like you. Oh my God, get rid of this. All right, so graphs are pretty simple, helpful. I think that Keith would have shared a lot of information with you guys yesterday about representing your graphs and stuff like that. But I'm just going to add a little to that. So that's your demand, that's your supply. This is the RPQ. PX. This is your price. All right, so something to note, demand always downward sloping, supply always upward sloping, right? Your demand curve is dependent on your consumers. Your supply curve is dependent on your producers. There are factors that affect demand as well as there are factors that affect supply. Demand, as I said, is determined by us consumers. So anything that affects us can affect demand. Supply is determined by our producers. Anything that affects the suppliers can affect supply. So we mentioned before that there is a shift and there's something called movement along the curve. Movement along the curve, as I've mentioned a few times, is caused by price. A change in price causes movement along the curve. Movement along either curve, whether demand or supply. So in the case of demand, if we have a price here of $10, we notice that our demand is pretty low. I'm going to put 5 here. Demand is pretty low. If we move down here to say 1, we notice that the demand moves now from 5 to 10. So if the price is high, your demand will be low. If your price is low, demand will be high. Just look at it as people like cheap things. That's the best way to look at it. People like cheap things. So the smaller the price or the less they have to pay, the more of it they'll want. Now to look at the supply curve now, which is the opposite. If I have a supply curve and, well, I'm a producer. Say I produce banana chips and I'm currently charging, let me see. Let me put by the 1 here and the 10 here. So $1 for banana chips. There's not much profit to be gained from selling banana chips for $1. So I'm going to, and remember, there are several companies in the market producing the same good. We're assuming that it's perfectly competitive. So $1, I'm not going to want to produce too much banana chips because there's not much profit in that. But if they were to raise the price of banana chips now to $10, I would want to increase my production because the more of a good you produce at a higher price is the more profit you can gain. So you would want to produce your banana chips at a higher level than that of a lower one on your supply curve. So that was movement along the curve. Shift now. So we're going to look at the demand curve first, and then we'll look at the others. So a shift in the demand curve is caused by anything outside a price. So we're going to look at a scenario where income is the factor. You're currently working, let's say, a summer job. The market is pretty saturated for a summer job. So maybe they're paying like, say, 10,000 a week. 10,000 a week. So the demand would be the companies who are seeking the interns. If there is a high demand, meaning that they really need interns, they're not going to pay the same $10 or $10,000 because they're going to say, in order to attract these persons, we need to spruce it up. Right? Them increasing their price would cause an influx of interns, hence totally shifting the curve. So your income is going to increase from 10 to 15. You now have more money to buy banana chips. You're not going to want one banana chips anymore because, again, you're working and using your energy. So you're going to need more fuel. So you're going to increase your demand. If it is that there was probably something happened and the companies decide, oh, we don't want any more interns. They finish what they needed to do and we're going to send some of them away. Our persons are resigning, so the amount is being reduced. They're going to say, all right, we're not trying to attract people, so we're going to reduce the amount that we pay these interns. Your pay cutbacks are cut below the 10,000. So you're now at this line. So it's below the 10,000 now. They probably give you like 8,000, 9,000. You now have to cut back on your expenses so you're not consuming as much bananas as before or banana chips as before. So that would cause income causing a shift in your demand curve. Supply side now, the suppliers who are supplying the banana chips. Let me use a different color. We're assuming that there was this new technology that came in and they're able to produce more banana chips more effectively than people who were packing before. So they send home some of the people and they bought like 2 of the machines. So efficiency is happening in the business. The curve would shift downwards. Why downwards? Because as I said, we're accounting for efficiency and increase in production. If we're looking at increase in production, obviously the quantity would have to increase. And quantity increases in this direction. So that is why your curve shifts downwards and not upwards like the demand curve. If we're looking at the point where production decreases, probably there was an increase in the cost of production, the machine broke down and they probably have to pay a lot of money to fix it. So they reverted back to working with laborers. So they're still paying for the broken machine as well as they're paying labor. So a lot of money is being spent. And they're at this curve now. They're at this curve. That now would be a decline in that the quantity is now moving not in the rightward direction, but now in the leftward direction. So that would be a reduction in your supply. So what you need to note, shifting your supply in terms of increase, it shifts outwards. Decrease shifts closer to your y-axis. For demand, an increase is an upward movement, a decrease is a downward movement. Just know that the supply and demand curve are opposite of each other. All right. So that's it from me, guys. If you have any questions, as I said, please drop them in the chat. I'm going to give you guys like the next minute or so to drop all the questions in the chat, and then I'll just go through and answer all of them, all right? That would give everybody a chance to see everybody's question and know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to stop presenting. So drop your questions in the chat. I'm seeing one so far. Waiting until 3, then I'll answer everybody. No, Miss Wilson, this is not law, this is economics. Yeah, that's fine. All right, so I guess this is the only question that we have. What is structural adjustments? So structural adjustments are basically things put in place by the IMF in order to get a country to perform properly. So there are certain terms and agreements you have to agree to once you make an agreement with the IMF. These structural adjustments, they're basically there for you to adhere to, or the country to adhere to, so that they can secure more loans. Because you might borrow a first loan and they give you a certain criteria that probably you have to increase GDP by 2%. That would be a structural adjustment, because you would have to make that adjustment before you can secure another loan from the organization. Yes, so it's basically stipulations put in place by the IMF to regulate how a country behaves in order to secure another loan, or ensure that they'll be able to pay back whatever loans that they borrowed. I'm assuming there are no other questions. Monetary versus fiscal policy. So the key difference between monetary and fiscal policy is that monetary policies are implemented by the government. Not monetary, fiscal policies, sorry, are implemented by the government, and monetary policies are implemented by the central bank. You missed the whole session? It was recorded on YouTube, so you can rewatch it. And when they're applied to recession versus inflation. All right, so monetary policies as I said, is what the central bank does. So the central bank can implement a lot of things in order to fight recession. It can be that they want to reduce the amount of money in circulation. Reducing the amount of money in circulation affects both recession and inflation. So that's something to note. Usually when countries are going through a recession, they're experiencing some sort of inflation. So the two are kind of linked, but there's still a distinction because one can exist without the other. So they can play with the interest rate because, you know, the borrowing rate that banks get from the central bank, it is pushed forward to us consumers. So they can play with the interest rate. They can also play with their policy rate. Policy rate is a huge thing that affects the banks, the governments, any business that operates within the scope of the central bank. So that is another way they can also, yes, and they also have reserve requirements. So monetary policies, as I said, it's what the central bank does. The central bank cannot do everything in order to fight recession and inflation. So it's usually a cooperative relationship between the government and the central bank. Usually they would tell you that some countries have their central bank being independent while other countries have it being a subsidy of the government. Persons prefer that they're separate because they don't want the government to be able to influence the market, because that would not be a free market, or it would just be a planned market basically if the government has control of your central bank. So to answer your question, Issa, in relation to your recession, the central bank can do something. They can play with the interest rate. They can play with the policy rate. They can do a lot of things. On the government side, the government can play with tax. They can play with import and exports and stuff like that. So you have to look at the scenario specifically to see what you're actually looking at and apply each to the scenario. But as I said, each group has several things that they can do to combat either, whether it's recession or inflation. And Omario would have stated to that they have a reserve requirement. Every central bank has a reserve requirement. So in case the country goes under, they're able to suffice or find money to help us for at least a period of time. Hence the reason why persons don't want the central bank to be a part of the government. Because you know, if government owns the central bank, they can go in and do whatever they want. Any other questions? I'm guessing not. So you're welcome. So in closing, guys, remember, econ is about knowing the relationship that exists between the different things. Know your graphs. If sometimes you don't know the key terms, but when you know your graph, sometimes it can help to break down the question. Multiple choices aren't always about answering everything. It's about going through and ensure that you answer the questions properly, because you might not finish the question and it might throw you off on something, but try to work effectively and not quickly. So if you have any other questions, you can feel free to reach out to us in the WhatsApp group. And that would be the end of it for us today, guys. Thank you for coming.